welcome to the We Are Birmingham podcast. I'm Chris Golding.
I'm Matthew Elliott.
And as ever, we're joined by the vegan. Good evening, Dave.
Evening, gents.
We're also joined by Ben from the Blues Breakdown Twitter account. Welcome again, Ben. Welcome back.
Good evening.
How are we doing?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. All good.
Exciting time for you at the moment. Get to talk about some stats.
Yeah.
Stats and figures.
My favourite.
What you love. Should we just get straight into it, or do you have you got anything to say on the season just gone?
No.
That you can condense down into a sentence rather than 45 minutes.
Because we're all done with last season.
No. I think enough's been said, written, spoken about. Let's close the book on last season and move on.
Close that chapter and move forward.
Indeed.
Right, I'm going to jump in first, and I've got a question for you.
Ooh.
And I'm going to throw you right under the bus with it. Out of all the managers that have been mentioned, not all of them, a handful, a selection of them. We've got Alex Neil, we've got Heckingbottom, we've got Challinor, we've got Williamson's been mentioned, Rosenia. How do they stack up in terms of what Blues were looking at with the open house? At the open house, the key stats and figures that they were putting in place and saying this is what we're looking for in terms of the next sort of 3, 4, 5 years of the project. This is how we want to play. That obviously then tied in with Tony Mowbray and the selection, because those stats and figures tied up. How does that tie in with the managers that we've been looking at the moment?
So assume you're referring there to the open house stats, where I think it was teams that have been promoted or finished in the top 6 of the championship had all hit these kind of certain metrics over the time. So yeah, broadly speaking, all of the names that you've mentioned there, by and large, hit majority, if not all, of kind of those metrics that the club are looking at. So I think it's. Well, there's been no hugely credible links yet, but those that have kind of been linked on social media, I think all fall within that bucket of probably ticking those boxes. We're not looking at a Rowett type who probably doesn't hit some of those metrics as closely. So yeah, no, by and large, broadly, all fairly in line probably with what the club are looking to do going forward, to varying degrees, obviously.
Are there? If you were basing it purely on stats, is there anyone that's like a standout candidate based on the figures that you've got?
Purely on data.
Yep.
I think if you're looking purely at data, you're probably looking at somebody like Dave Challinor at Stockport County at the moment. In his time with them in being promoted from League Two, they have performed really well in terms of goals scored, expected goals against, goals conceded. Not massively high possession-wise, but good in terms of pressing from the front as well. So I think from a purely data point of view, he's probably the one out of the names that you've mentioned that if you were to take away the names and everything else surrounding them, he's probably the one that you'd pinpoint and go, oh, yeah, that looks interesting.
Do those figures, the possession figures, do they generally drop as you drop down the leagues anyway? So you sort of are you expecting a League Two side to potentially play less passes, play less possession football because of the situation that you're in, and maybe the players aren't of such a good quality as the Championship?
It varies to a degree. So I mean, the majority of outlets these days that will publish possession stats, etc., is essentially possession is just the number of passes that both teams have made divided by the number of passes that team's made. So in terms of actual possession numbers, it doesn't vary as you go down the leagues. What you do get is obviously a difference then in the number of passes, so tends to drop a little bit as you go down the leagues, as you say. Number of factors around that, quality of player, quality of pitches and surfaces, etc., that they're playing on. But having said that, Mike Williamson's MK Dons team this year averaging around about 570 passes, which is the most out of all of the kind of names that we've had a look at. Were a couple of games where they were playing over 700 passes in the game in League Two, and that's real possession heavy stuff.
Is that sort of possession for the sake of possession at times, though? Does it translate into possession higher up the pitch?
I mean, it depends how deep you want to get into this early. I mean, I very much I very much kind of see, if we take the kind of names that we've looked at, is you've got Alex Neil and Paul Heckingbottom who fit into this kind of philosophy, I guess, that the club are looking for in terms of, they do largely have more possession than the opposition teams, but they're not an extreme of this kind of style, whereas then you go to the other end and you've got guys like Mike Williamson and Liam Rossini who are probably at the other end, who are very, very possession heavy. And actually, if you look at I was looking earlier on, Mike Williamson's MK Dons this season, they were averaging something like 65% of the total passes they made were inside their own half. That said, their goal scored and XG is fairly good for for the fact that they are quite possession heavy, whereas someone like Liam Rossini at Hull last year probably struggled a little bit more with that. Yes, they were possession heavy, lots of possession within their own half, but then really struggled to make a difference in the final third.
I think
you mentioned that last week, didn't you?
Yeah. Not last year.
Last week.
Last week I think Chewy mentioned that he knew someone who loves rugby, lives in Hull.
I think the two go hand in hand, to be fair. Funny enough, the Mike Williamson thing is quite interesting. So I was talking to somebody else about it the other day. He said, the MK Dons fans don't like him. And I was like, what? So I went on their message board. They do not like him.
Really?
They do not like him at all. No, they think he's tactically naive, and a lot of them think it's possession for the sake of possession. That the defence is awful. The goalkeeper's shocking. How much of that is actually down to Williamson, I don't know. He's obviously picking them, but I think a lot of them just after the playoffs wanted him gone. It's quite for MK Dons. It's quite a savage message for to be fair. I was quite surprised because I was only having a nosy around just to see what their thoughts are. I've only seen bits of them for like the playoffs and like one or two games on TV, and even then it was fleeting and not really sitting down to watch the whole game. And generally thought they look like really, really good. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Ben. But I was quite surprised.
MK Don fans should be fairly used to that sort of style, though, because they've previously had Russell Martin in charge, Liam Manning, both of them. Particularly Russell Martin, very, very possession heavy, lots in their own half. Maybe they're just a bit sick and tired of it by now. But it's interesting, isn't it, that you say that he's not particularly well liked there. And I, for quite some time, was a sceptic of Russell Martin. That he kind of I don't want to use the word failed upwards, because he didn't fail necessarily, but he left the MK Dons team kind of mid-table-ish to then land the Swansea job. Who then didn't really do a lot at Swansea that necessarily warranted getting the Southampton job, and now he's a Premier League manager. And I think when you've got that style of play that clearly involves lots of tactical instructions, and you need a higher quality of player, so he was basically hired and has gone upwards in his career because of the fact that he can clearly coach a very specific and highly technical brand of football. Player.
Yeah, and then because Southampton have had the money and the players to do that, it's been a lot easier.
Exactly, and I just wonder if Mike Williamson maybe is following along that type of path, that will actually see him move up in his career without necessarily
spend 50 million in League One, aren't we? So let's just do it. Let's go.
Without necessarily achieving too much to get these jobs. So I think he's certainly an interesting one to watch. Another
one of those that comes off of the MK Dons production line almost, isn't it now? So
yeah, and they've got a good record. As I say, Russell Martin, have a Premier League manager with Southampton. Liam Manning did well at Oxford, and then got the job at Bristol City, and has done a fairly decent job there as well so far. So,
did you nearly say Russell Brand then?
Close. And I tell you what, at one point his hair is going that way as well, Russell Martin. So he's in that in between stage of transitioning to Russell Brand.
The other thing that you just pointed out a little while back when you were talking about Alex Neil, and you were saying that he plays the sort of brand of football that we're looking for a lot of people, like, just when his name was mentioned, no, don't want him. Like, he's boring. He plays boring football.
I think his personality plays a bit into that as well. I think people get
because he's boring.
Distracted or put off by it. Maybe it's a Scottish thing, but maybe it's just like he always seems like he's just like he always feels quite downbeat, doesn't he, as well? But when I've watched some of his teams, generally think they've looked, obviously not Stoke, pretty good. I thought he did really well at Preston with very little money to spend. Obviously, I think it went stale towards the end, but I think after a while that does happen if you haven't got anything to progress. But interested to know, because obviously I think he's obviously less possession heavy than the rest of the managers that we've mentioned. I mean, what are your? I do know your thoughts on him. I think he's your pick to get us out of League One, isn't he, Ben? Based on conversations I've seen or been part of on social media.
Yeah,
at least he was one of your.
So he was a name that I kind of mentioned probably about a week or so
beforehand, wasn't it? Yeah.
Before Mowbray was confirmed as not. I'd probably take this opportunity to say I'm not an Alex Neil fanboy. Let's just put that one out there. But unlike some, I can absolutely see the logic behind why he is potentially a candidate for the job. Yeah, as you say, he's not as I put him in that bracket as he probably fits the criteria, but to a lesser extreme than some of the others. Looking at his time with Preston, Sunderland, and then Stoke, averaging about 52% possession across that period, so fits into that, about 440-ish passes a game at about 70% accuracy, so just hitting those metrics that Blues mentioned at the open house. Probably, and I think this is possibly where the kind of boring football tag potentially comes from, that he's probably a little bit more pragmatic than some of the others. So if you look at the goals scored, 1.24 a game, and then 1.15 against, so they tend to be closer margin games, I would say, that Alex Neil teams play. You're unlikely to be winning games 3-4-0, which is not good for your predictions, Chris, come next season if he's appointed. I hate to say.
What about in League One, though? In League One, with
possibly
the biggest budget that League One's ever seen.
Who knows?
The 150 million that we're going to spend.
I'm not ruling out 1,000 goals next season.
That's happening.
So,
but maybe not under Alex Neil, who's going to play 1-0 every game.
No, and I'm not saying that he's that type, and it's certainly, I've seen a lot of comparisons between Alex Neil and Gary Rowett, and I don't think that's quite fair. I just think that generally the teams are the games are a little bit lower margin. That said, looking at the Preston team that he had, as you say, I think he had probably a bottom 8 budget there for the majority of the time that he was with them. Finishes of 7th, 14th, 9th and 13th. But when you put that into the context of the year before he took over, they finished 11th. And then the 2 subsequent seasons after he left, they finished 13th and 12th. So I would say he'd certainly overperformed in 2 of the seasons that he was there. He stepped up. So the possession stats for the season before he was hired, 45%. The first season he was in charge, 52, 51 the second season, 52, and then 49 in his final season. So he kind of changed the style of play. Simon Grayson was in charge of Preston when he took over. He changed the style of play there to something that was probably a bit more attractive to watch. I think he probably gets a bit of a bad rep because of the recent, it's a bit of recency bias with what happened at Stoke. But actually, that Alex Neil team, Preston team, particularly in the first season, was quite front foot. They're a very, very high press team, looking to get after people. I certainly don't think it's all that bad. And if I said this to somebody the other day, if you're judging a manager on the job that they do at Stoke, it's like judging a manager on the job that they do at Blues.
Yeah, there's not many managers that have had much success there in recent years, are there? So
no, it's impossible to. It's just one of those where I think you just wipe it off when you're looking at managerial records, because everyone has struggled there. They can start well for a few games and then just tail off. And
Apart from Nathan Jones, we've absolutely got to judge Nathan Jones on his Stoke time. It's quite interesting. Philip West, the Sunderland fan who we've had on a couple of times, I think he came on and gave us a comment about Tony Mowbray when he took over. He came on for the preview of the fixture as well, I think. He actually sent a message as soon as he'd seen it being sort of rumoured. And he just said, I'm not sure if you've seen the rumours of Alex Neil being linked with you. Of course we have. But in my opinion, he's about as good as an appointment as you could make for a League One campaign. He made a huge impact at Sunderland when we were aiming for promotion. And with a full pre-season to work with your squad, which we've obviously got to put together, I think you could be very confident of a promotion challenge. He thinks that my concern to that, and I made that clear to you as well, Ben, was that I'm not sure of where his ceiling is in terms of the progression. My thinking is at the moment that I want Blues to choose someone that we can grow with as a club, and not to have a couple of seasons. Yeah, we're back in the Championship now. Let's change the manager and go again. I'm not sure where his ceiling is. Philip said upper mid-table in the Championship, I'd say. All depends on whether he's backed and doesn't fall out with anyone in the boardroom, which he's obviously got a bit of history with as well.
I'll come back to one of the points in a minute. In terms of Alex Neil, you've got, as I say, he probably, to lesser extreme, hits some of the stylistic points that Blues are probably looking for. He's a triple promotion winning manager. So promoted with Hamilton into the SPL in his first full season. He then took over a Norwich team that had just come down from the Premier League and were just outside the playoffs, I think, when he took over, and he finished third with them, promoted through the playoffs. Poor Premier League season, but that happens. And then obviously joined Sunderland after Lee Johnson was sacked. And again, I think I read at the time, and I spoke about this, I think, when I came on to talk about Mowbray, in terms of Sunderland hired a data firm to pick the next manager when Lee Johnson was sacked, and their initial pick was Tony Mowbray, but he wasn't available, so they went with Alex Neil, which is interesting. The other thing that I picked up during the kind of article that I was reading was that at the time, Sunderland reckoned, the data firm reckoned, that Sunderland had about a 30% chance of reaching the playoffs that season. And the data kind of suggested that Alex Neil would improve that to at least 50%.
They went 15. He lost his first game, then they went 15 games unbeaten, didn't they, or something, for the end of the season.
Yeah, and then promoted via the playoffs, beating Wickham. So not only is it a triple promotion winning manager, he's also done it 3 times through the playoffs, which I don't know how relevant that is, but having playoff winning experience, I think, is always useful. Probably points to somebody.
Hopefully not needed.
Hopefully not needed. But
doesn't play into the 100 plus points, 1,000 goals thing, does it?
No,
it doesn't. I mean, it won't be needed, but just useful to have that in the back pocket. I think the concern potentially that I probably have with Alex Neil is he's quite stubborn. So he had a falling out at Sunderland, partly because of the fact that I think he was given a 12-month rolling contract. Got them promoted, basically wanted to rediscuss some terms, and they weren't that interested in opening negotiations. He also fell out over their transfer policy. So he was head coach at Sunderland. They had a director of football who was very heavily involved, recruitment policy that revolved essentially around picking up younger players with less experience. He was not a fan of that, wanted a bit more control over the transfer situation, and I think both of those things ultimately led to his departure. Now I know Sunderland fans are very bitter about it, the way that he left, and that's fine. I think that happens. Stoke clearly offered him a way out, and then the opportunity to have a bit more influence in the transfers in their season. My concern would be, can he build a squad? So he went in at Norwich mid-season, got them promoted with a team that he basically inherited. Not a huge amount of transfer business in the Premier League. Went in at Sunderland midway through the season. Not a huge amount of transfer business again that he led in the summer within their promotion. Reading between the lines at his time in Preston, there were some players certainly that he signed that I think have gone on to have good careers. Ryan Ledson certainly. I'm trying to think who else he signed whilst he was there. That's done quite well. There was a handful of names, about 4 or 5. There was quite a few bits and pieces that I read on Preston forums, etc., that said he was probably very good at developing players. Some of the ones that he signed were duds. I mean, that happens. But I think there's a question mark over his ability to build a squad, which he will certainly, possibly, have to do at Blues, depending on how much influence a manager / head coach is going to get.
On the developing player side of things, do we have any idea of his... does he promote youth? Does he develop young players? What's the... Because I'm not sure off the top of my head. Obviously, at Sunderland, he was probably made to play as many young players as possible based on what we know around them. But I don't know what history tells us elsewhere.
I've got on my spreadsheet as well average age, and I've got nothing in there, which is poor prep on my behalf. I'm just thinking about it. There's nothing that particularly stands out, I don't think, from his time as a manager. He's clearly got some favourites. Daniel Johnson, Ben Pearson, that's kind of followed him around to a couple of different clubs now. It's certainly not something that I've kind of picked up doing any research that he massively favours one way or the other. The one thing that I did pick up from both Preston and Sunderland fans, and to a lesser extent some Stoke fans, is that tactically he's quite good as well. So I think he's quite flexible, which possibly points to why his the metrics are not particularly
his
extreme.
in-game management is supposed to be quite good from what I'd read from on a few different forums and a few comments from other people, and he seems to be pragmatic in a way where he can, I guess this goes two ways, where he kind of sets up the team to nullify the opposition, and sometimes will switch things around a little bit, might overthink it sometimes, which there's a couple of other managers in the list I think have been guilty of doing that as well. But I mean, where's your head at with doing stuff like that? Because I think sometimes is overthinking it, trying to be the smartest guy in the room doesn't always work, when you should really be trying to impose yourself on the opposition if you are confident in the formation and the style of the brand of football that you want to play. I mean, how do you feel about someone that maybe has to tweak things game in, game out, because he has concerns about the opposition?
I think it's massively dependent on the context. So if you're a Preston with a bottom 8 budget and you're fighting to be in the top 8, I think it's probably necessary to really think about every single game in massive amounts of detail. And a lot of top sports people and coaches and athletes and whatever talk about the 1%. What else can you squeeze out of a performance to get you over the line? I think we've got to take it back to next season. We are likely to be, or should be hoping to be, a dominant force within League One. And therefore, I think it's probably less about tactical tweaks and things like that. It's about setting up a system and a structure that for 80% of the season is going to be better than anybody else that we come up against.
I mean, when you spend 200 million in League One, you should be able to do
It's going up.
Are we on 1,500 goals now?
That fan part's going to make us some money.
1,000 goals still, but we're just having to spend a bit more to get there, that's all.
So, have we got any other obviously Alex Neil has been the big one on everyone's lips at the moment, because Football Insider have sent everybody loopy, and I'm not sure if they have any inside source. My belief is that they're still interviewing, so whether or not they are at a point that they're ready to do final interviews or even pick someone, I don't know. But are we good with Neil? Do we want to move on to someone else? Or have you got any other questions on Neil? Or is there anything that you can think of, Ben, that...
So there's one thing that I want to say actually before we do move on. It's what Ben's mentioned about the... I think he mentioned it about Sunderland getting the team in to come in and look at the stats and to go, right, this is what we're going to base it on. We believe that Blues have gone that route and that they've got a big analysis team in to come and sit there and sort of make these suggestions. So it's no surprise that we've sort of done the Mowbray, Neil. We're probably looking at very similar sort of figures to what they were looking at. But it's just a bit frustrating that you've got people that are saying look at this type of manager, look for these stats and these figures and go and do it properly. It now seems like we're actually doing it properly. We're looking at the stats and figures that fit. And as soon as a name's mentioned, it's like, no, not him, no, bullshit, he's fucking terrible.
This doesn't fall into the no fear football category.
It clearly does. And I mean, you've seen the stats and stuff, and they do fit in there, and it's just that frustration a little bit, I suppose. That it's like,
I think it's probably metrics as well that weren't mentioned in the open house that they used this data to narrow the field down as well. So I'd imagine it's not just around possession and chances created, but there's maybe bits around development of players and I don't know. Ben, sorry.
Just while we're talking about that, and obviously every club's recruitment process for a manager will be completely different. But if anyone wants an insight into a very recent recruitment process, the Plymouth chairman and owner today, Simon Hallett, put a video out basically going into quite a bit of depth and was quite honest about the reasons behind the hiring of a certain former Birmingham City manager.
Use the word manager loosely, shall we?
We should on that point. We should probably just say he's been sent to room 101 because you won that last week, Chewy. It was a no contest.
I mean, the cup of tea didn't win it.
No,
I mean,
absolutely not.
So I've not seen this video, but I think I might want to go back and see it because for me, it just smelled like someone that knows Rooney from old. I thought, oh, this is kind of familiar in a way, but they've obviously released this video just to try and.
Yeah, and it's so. I mean, Simon Hallett talks and says, it was a data pick, which is really interesting because the Blues said that it was the data that kind of led them to Wayne Rooney as well, and he was very upfront and honest and said, we didn't look at any of the data from his time at Blues. Like we know that was poor. However, we believe that he improved the DC United side. He improved a Derby County side. Then goes on, and it's less about that I was interested in. He then goes on and said, actually we sent them all personality tests beforehand.
I smell bullshit. Ginster's pasty bullshit. What the fuck is this?
Also, sorry, you can't discount if you're going to base something on stats. You can't discount the stats you don't like. That's just bullshit.
And
it sounds like it's election campaigns.
If you're paying for it, you absolutely can, can't you? If you're saying I'm going to employ someone, we'll just miss out that wedge.
Sorry, Ben, carry on.
There were some really interesting sound clips from that as well. My two favourites were Wayne is very media friendly and has a great relationship with fans and players. Again, possibly very, very true outside of his time at Birmingham. I'm sure we're looking at it through very, very different glasses to a lot of people. Whether or not the kind of the content of it is kind of irrelevant. It's just an interesting insight into how clubs recruit for a manager. Yeah. So if anyone's kind of interested in that type of thing, Simon Hallett on the Plymouth Argyle Twitter page for that type of thing.
On Twitter, can you, when we post the podcast out, can you share this with the link to it as well?
I can certainly do that.
Thank you, mate.
I'm going to look for that later when I'm
gonna
awake
give it
at
a
like 4 a.m. because my ill child can't sleep. One of my ill children can't sleep. I'm going to be watching that for a good laugh just to cheer me up, I think.
It does surprise me that he's won a personality contest though. Like, I genuinely can't say that.
Well, apparently all three candidates that got to the final interview all had very, very similar personality types, which then might bring us on nicely onto the next name. Paul Heckingbottom.
So Paul Heckingbottom, yeah, I was going to say that's the name I had next anyway. But I think Ben looks like he was leading the way there. So
I was trying to roll into it without going, who should we talk about next?
So Heckingbottom was the one I mentioned last time round as well. He was one of my favourites because he'd had promotions on his CV, and he plays quite an aggressive attacking style of football without sacrificing the defensive work. He's not super heavy possession based, but still more possession based than probably we've been used to, from my understanding. So yeah, he's been my choice of the lot. If we were to go with someone that's still fairly young but got quite good experience and promotion on his CV, he's my favourite. But Ben, thoughts? What can you tell us about the stats that you've looked up? And
so I as I said earlier, I'd put him in the same kind of bracket as Alex Neil in terms of hitting majority of the kind of stylistic metrics that the club are probably looking for without it being a massively extreme style. Again, as you say, for a relatively young manager, he's got quite a bit of experience. Promotion with Barnsley from League One via the playoffs into the Championship, and then a fairly decent season afterwards before jumping ship to Leeds at a time when, again, if you're judging a manager on their performance at Leeds during that period, is probably very unfair.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in while we're on that sort of period of time that he was at Leeds? One thing that I was impressed with, the youth that he brought through, and that I think could be, if he was the option for us, that could be quite key next season, because we were saying we've got so many games in League One and the different cups, and
he has a history of that as well, doesn't he? He's always been quite keen to do that. Obviously, he was under 20 development manager at Barnsley.
Yeah, did a lot of youth coaching, didn't he, and things. So not massively surprising. Yeah, but looking at his time from Barnsley through to Sheffield United, I think he's averaging about 48% possession, but I would throw in the caveat in there that he took charge of a very, very, very poor Sheffield United side of the Premier League. So I think when we're talking about the kind of stats and putting them out there, you've just got to keep reminding yourself of the context.
I think Championship was around 55%, was it, in the Championship or something?
Yeah, what have we got? So he was 38% in the Premier League, 51% in his promotion winning season at Sheffield United, 55% in his playoff season with Sheffield United, 42% Sheffield United in his interim spell back in like 2020, and then around about 50% at Hibs and Leeds. So yeah, he's probably, as I say, he's on the cusp there, but he's not a possession heavy manager.
He's more sort of from the Sheffield United team, because I thought that Championship team was really, really good. They seemed quite aggressive, sort of would press from the front and look for quite a lot of high turnovers and create chances that way from what I remember of them. Well, it wasn't even that long ago, was it? I say what I remember, like it was years ago. But I really liked that team. And it wasn't, you wouldn't say it was filled with stars either. Good players, but not necessarily filled with stars. So I really like him. I'm kind of keen. I'll be quite happy to see Heckingbottom come in at Blues. I know other people don't like the name, just the name in general.
Personality as well, as Ben was saying.
Yorkshire pint of gravy type, isn't he? I guess, but. Is any, like, from a defensive point of view, because obviously I think if I remember correctly, they were quite good with set pieces as well. In both boxes, they were quite a physical team as well as being fairly attractive. anything on that side, or?
Yeah, again, in a very, I think I've said a couple of times to people that Neil was the name that I kind of suggested just because it seemed kind of attainable at the time. But for me, you could toss a coin between Alex Neil and Heckingbottom. Ultimately, I think they're very, very similar in terms of what they've achieved and how they've achieved it. So again, I very much see Heckingbottom as being somebody that would do a job. I don't know. That's doing him a disservice. Would do more. It would do more than a job. It's a safe pair of hands and somebody that's got experience. That I think you would. It's not flashy, but you'd kind of go, yeah, okay, that's. I'm happy with that. We talk about. Just go back to your point earlier, Chris, about ceilings.
Yeah, I for me, Heckingbottom has a higher ceiling than Neil. I don't know if you guys agree, but
yeah, probably, but not much higher.
No, not massively.
No, but it was.
But you don't know, because the situation again with Sheffield United, it's like, is it a different scenario for Blues if you were to build this team from where we are now and develop that going forward? Is it something that you could take further, I suppose? But yeah, I'm not sure where his ceiling is.
In terms of stuff like chances created and things like that, have you got data on how the chances were created or where the goals came from, like what areas of the pitch? Or I'm just intrigued to know if there was a certain way that they created most of their goals, or
nothing that I've done so far.
Get out.
Save the kind of real in detail stuff until we're maybe a bit closer to knowing who it might be.
That's fair. That's fair. I was just if we could separate the two a little bit more with just
scratching the surface at this stage.
Yeah.
I mean, again, my possibly concern of Heckingbottom is he's never really stuck around at clubs too long. Not necessarily always through his own fault. And again, I just wonder about squad building with him. So, kind of came into a Leeds team where he wasn't there very long. Went to Hibs, didn't spend very long at Hibs. Then, obviously, at Sheffield United, he inherited a couple of teams, and they didn't do a huge amount of business actually when they came down from Premier League into the Championship. So they had a basis of a very good squad, and he added a couple of sprinkling to it. Morgan Gibbs-White was somebody I think that they brought in on loan, didn't they? And he was very, very good. But yeah, again, in a season where we're going to need upwards of 15, 20 new recruits potentially.
Hopefully not that many.
Spending £250 million as well.
No, I think that's fair comment. I think for me, I just see both of those as kind of, I think everyone said it, like more of a safe pair. But I know people want that sexy appointment where you can start building from the ground up, bringing they're all young really in theory. Bringing a young sexy manager, it's going to create this like fast, free flowing football. But I think there's probably in the back of the owners' minds and the board's mind that they don't want to be in League One for any more than one season, and it must be it's a really difficult job for them, obviously. But like, how do they do this? Do they and to sort of plan for the future and then just think, well, if we're down here for 3 seasons, so be it, because that would just put them way behind in terms of their plans for the club? Or do they go like, this guy has more chance of getting us up, we'll go for him now, and then in 18 months' time, we'll sack him after he's beat West Brom at home 3-1 and bring in a flashy name or something along those lines.
You and I had this debate the other day, didn't we, Chris, on social media in terms of, and I'm not advocating we hire somebody and then as soon as we get to where we want to, we sack them. But I do. I had a quick look. So the average tenure of an EFL manager over the last 3 seasons is about 400 days. So we're talking about just over a year.
Yeah.
and there's some massive outliers on that as well, both ways, obviously. But when you consider you've got people like Matt Gray in there from Sutton, or he was Sutton United manager and had been since like 2009. There's some guys that throw that off. So, my point, and I fully get behind the idea of it would be wonderful if we could appoint a manager in League One who gets us out of League One, gets us up the table in the Championship, gets promoted from the Championship and takes us into the Premier League, and then
the Champions League.
And that's the fairy tale, right? In the same way that we all want to win the Premier League title with a team of academy youngsters who've come through the academy, but I don't want to say it's a fantasy, but it's very close to. So I think we've got to be pragmatic.
I'm just going to say though, the flip side of that is that you look at what Wrexham have done. Granted, they've had a massive budget, and they've gone about it a certain way, but they've stuck with Parkinson, and it's worked for them. They've been advised by someone. I mean, the documentary showed that they've been advised by someone. They've picked him. They've stuck with him, and it's paid off for them. Yes, they've had massive budgets to use for it, but it's working. He's never going to be with them for the next 10 years, but he's going to get them to the Championship, which is probably their point where it's going to get much tougher.
And that's fair. I guess with Parkinson, he came from 2 or 3. He was definitely, I'm trying to think if he managed in the Championship. He was definitely a League One manager. I think he managed the season in the Championship.
Yeah, I'm sure he's been in the Championship.
So that, I guess, would be like us hiring someone at the bottom of the Premier League to be our manager now, and then not being surprised that they've taken us back up there. I'm not discrediting the job that he's done, but I think
I don't know at the time though.
He was a very good League One manager, which was 2 divisions above what they were playing at the time.
Yeah, fair.
And
sold their project.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm not discrediting, and we may well go down the route of trying to find somebody who we think can probably take us to a point. I just think it's very unlikely that as a League One club, you will find the club will be able to find a manager that will come to us and have that kind of longevity. I genuinely believe whoever gets us up will then probably find that they're not going to be the person that takes us on that next step, because I don't believe Tony Mowbray was. Genuinely. I love Tony Mowbray to bits.
I don't think that Tony Mowbray believed that he was, though. I think that he probably, again, we talk about ceilings, he probably knew where his sort of ceiling would be for Blues, and he probably believed that to be getting us into the Premier League. I think
I tweeted something when either Mowbray was announced or it was close to being announced that he was the person to take us to the next level, but not the next, or the next step, but not to the next level, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So take us where we want to go, set us on our journey, but not take us into the Premier League, essentially. But
he's taking us up the stairs to that next floor, but not any higher.
But not through the door.
Not up the next set of stairs.
Not the next set of stairs.
Up to the loft.
And that, I guess, is where it comes back to: are the club looking to hire just a manager to get what the club looking to hire? Are they looking to hire a manager that's going to get us promoted at the first time of asking? Are they looking for a manager who's going to implement a really clearly defined style of play and sacrifice potentially some immediate success? Are they looking for a manager that can build on the work, I guess, that John Eustace had started and that Tony Mowbray had done in terms of setting standards and building a culture? Because let's not forget that 12 months ago, even 12, 18 months ago, the club was in a really dire state of affairs, and it's still not perfect. So I think there's still some of that needs to go, which is probably why you're seeing people possibly being linked with the club like Heckingbottom and Neil. There's some no-nonsense guys that have been there, done it, seen it all before types. And I don't know, I'm not saying that that's the right answer, but I can see why that's the type that we're being linked with.
Right, Ben, should we look at some more options?
Yes, let's. Where should we go next? Dave Challinor?
Yeah, I got a bone to pick with Dave because he broke my heart the day he took Andy Legg's world record for the longest throw-in. So on that merit alone, I don't really want him at the club.
Okay, move on. Next.
You didn't know what that record was, Matthew. Have you got the details?
I'll find it in a minute. Hold on. He did take Andy Legg's world record for the throne, didn't he? I didn't just make that up. Start talking about it.
Let's hope not for the sake of continuity now.
Start talking about it.
Just make something up quickly.
So he actually threw a ball for 3 miles.
We like
did. 152 feet.
It's still going.
There we go.
You're going to say 152 miles.
It's just past Chris Waddle's World Cup penalty from 1990. It's still going.
And Stephen Clements's penalty at Blackpool in the League Cup.
We're providing you ample time to have found this.
So
while we were talking bullshit.
Didn't Ben just
Carry
tell
on.
us? Yeah, answer that. So Dave Challinor, obviously seems to be a lot of people's favourite at the moment. Done extremely well with Stockport, did well at Hartlepool. I think Fylde and Colwyn Bay he was at previous year as well. So what can you tell us about Mr. Challinor apart from his super long throw?
He's going to bring back Mark Roberts for the throws, obviously. No.
No.
Good.
I can edit some tumbleweed. Going
Please. Please do. Dave Challinor, yes. So, as Matthew said, he started kind of lower leagues, Colwyn Bay, Fylde, then got a chance with Hartlepool in the National League, took them from mid-table-ish, 13th, 15th, something like that, up to the playoffs where I think they missed out. Did they miss out or did they win? Can't remember.
Lost on penalties.
Did they lose on
this season?
No, that was...
No,
they were promoted. They were promoted this season. They
did. Yeah. Can we start again? Yeah, of course they were. 2023 playoff final. They lost on penalties.
Lost on penalties, and they were promoted automatically this season. But that's with Stockport.
Smashed it as well.
Yes. So, what can we say about Dave Challinor? Probably in the kind of next bracket up of managers in terms of a little bit more of a defined style, so a bit more possession heavy than Alex Neil and Paul Heckingbottom, averaging about 54% across his 2 seasons with Stockport. As we talked about earlier, being lower down the pyramid, slightly less passes, so they're averaging about 400 a game with an accuracy of just a shade under 70. Lots of goals, 1.5 goals a game, and they're conceding less than a goal a game across the 2 seasons. So what we talked about earlier in terms of data point of view that stands out, somebody averaging 54% possession across 2 seasons and scoring 1.5 goals a game while conceding less than a goal a game. If anyone's ever had a look on the Opta website, there's a page called like the Opta Analyst, and you can see kind of the team styles. So you've got kind of in the top left of the graph teams that play a very fast and direct style, and the teams in the kind of bottom right that play a very slow and intricate type of style. So Blues tend to be on, in the last couple of seasons, like more kind of fast and direct start quadrant. You've got guys like Williamson and Rossini who are down bottom right, who are very slow, direct, methodical. Chandler Stockport kind of sitting middle-ish, probably slightly towards the slow and intricate, but he's certainly it's certainly not possession based, and for possession's sake there's plenty behind it, and again, this is where using stats sometimes is really bad. So I saw somebody say the other day, completely out of context, Alex Neil's Stoke team played the highest number of long passes whilst he was in charge. Dave Chandler's Stockport side played the second number of long passes last season. Totally irrelevant, ultimately. You can cherry pick stats and take them out of context and use them how you are. So, it got a promotion on his CV. Stockport have heavily, have invested quite heavily in the playing side, not to quite the extent that someone like Wrexham have, but certainly when they came up from the National League, they spent quite big, and then they've spent quite big in the last 2 seasons, and probably will expect to spend a decent amount again.
But is it going to be 300 million?
It's probably not going to be 300 million.
No, so they can't compete with us.
It might not even be 100 million.
Right, Ben, I found what happened at Hartlepool. They got into the National League playoffs and they won on penalties, and then he left them to join Stockport the next season. So that's what happened.
Yes. Yeah, dropped back down a division. She left Hartlepool in League 2, dropped back into the National League with Stockport, promoted with Stockport.
Second time round.
Season with them in League 2 where they lost in the playoffs on penalties, and then they were promoted, the season just gone, automatically.
Second time round, that's what I meant.
Yes. We got there in the end.
Got there in the end.
Good.
Fact check, anyone? Vegan? I was on mute because he's because of his coughing fit. This is going really well, isn't it? Everyone's coughing.
So, from a stylistic point of view, then, everyone seems to be going mad around Dave Challinor, but I'm not sure how many people have actually seen his Stockport team play outside of the odd game potentially on TV. So, what can you tell us about him stylistically, his teams, and what could we maybe expect?
I mean, I'll be honest as well. I've not seen a huge amount of Stockport because they probably don't have a massive reason to watch Stockport games, obviously.
Have you not gone back and watched reruns? No.
I mean, bits and pieces. I mean, again, you know, it's they're as I say, they're not going to be. They're not a slow, intricate side. You know, like a Liam Rossini whole side. They're not a completely go along. It's
balance.
Yeah, and I think this is. I think when people talk about possession-based football, they don't necessarily mean possession-based football. I think what they want is a kind of a brand of football that ultimately is decent to watch. You know, where the ball gets forward quickly,
high tempo.
There are chances. There's chances
No
created. We're
fear.
looking to win the ball back. Not that phrase. And I think that's probably what Dave Challinor has moulded this Stockport team into. I mean, it's interesting as well. You look at, I guess we didn't touch on either of the 2 previous, you know, in terms of formations they play, but Alex Neil is largely a 4-2-3-1, which would be a continuation of what we've done. Heckingbottom probably more of a
3 at the back, wasn't it?
back 3. You know, spent a fair bit.
They were weird 'cause he played with like inverted fullbacks, and then he'd have his two of his centre backs pushing forward almost as.
Yeah, which is kind of, I guess, a continuation of what they've
Chris
done under
Wilder.
Chris Wilder, and
Yeah.
you know, his imprint is still all over the club, and Stockport primarily using a back 3 over the last couple of seasons as well. So, you know, not that necessarily means anything at all.
And apparently Blues can't play with 3 at the back. If you speak to some people who just think that it's apparently as a club, Birmingham City can't play as 3 at the back.
And the other thing I'll say is that
Can we?
the style of play is completely irrelevant when a football team is winning games and performing well. You never hear about. You never come away from a game and somebody goes, "I'll tell you what, it was a good win today, but you know, stylistically didn't enjoy it."
I mean, you do. That gets to a point. I mean, Millwall fans singing Gary Rowett, you football shit.
They had
and
4
were doing
years of
all
it.
right. But okay, it does wear thin though.
It does. But I mean, I guess. Wow, you could spend a whole podcast talking about whether or not Millwall was successful under Gary Rowett as well. That's an entirely different topic. I think ultimately, if Blues are winning games next season, largely people won't be overly fussed about how we're doing it, as long as it's not absolute drab, long ball, everything from set pieces.
We're not looking at that sort of
No, we're not.
brand of manager,
No.
and so we're probably not going to expect that type of football or experience it. So, in that regard, I think we're going to be all right. We're going to play something. We might be able to scrap it out at times, and we might be able to. We probably want to, especially next season, because the pitches aren't going to be nice, and you know it's going to be what it is. Sometimes you are going to be in a scrap, so deal with it. But we're looking at the right sort of names. I think the stats and the figures.
You'd hope so, wouldn't you? That's what they're paying this consultancy for.
and I suppose the thing is if we're saying that Heckingbottom and Alex Neil are probably a safe pair of hands, and possibly to a lesser extent Heckingbottom because he took charge of a quite dominant Sheffield United side in the Championship, but again we're going to be a big fish next year in League One. We're probably going to have, we are almost definitely going to have to make a lot of the running and a lot of the play next season. So actually looking at somebody like Dave Chandler, who's been a manager of a side that have largely dominated albeit in League Two, again, it makes sense, you know. Although he's not managed any higher than League Two, which always makes me laugh when people say, I said this to somebody the other day, fans on social media saying the next appointment's got to be a really ambitious appointment, so then you get linked with multiple promotion winning managers, and they go, no, that's not ambitious, we want the bloke from League who's never managed above League Two to manage us, that's ambitious. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but actually I think that's where having somebody who's got that, you know, has been the big fish in the pond, take them up to the next level, see how they get on, give them a bigger budget, you know, and hope that they can replicate that on a bigger scale, right?
See, for me, I don't think that's an ambition thing. I think that's more of the feeling that I am, where it's someone that grows with us, and it's a longevity thing, that we're going to have him stick around and sort of build a project with him, and it's obviously what he's done at Stockport, and if it was to come and do that at Blues, then you'd think, all right, okay, well, whatever, if we're talking about ceilings, whatever your ceiling is, we'll get to that point, and if that's Premier League, brilliant, fantastic, we'll go there with you. And I just think that type of manager, it's not so much an ambition thing, it's just like it's a bit of a gamble, but if it pays off, who knows where it takes you.
You kind of want some, I think we've already sort of skirted across it, but you kind of want someone to be able to build a culture within the club as well. You know, I think Eustace kind of went some way to doing that early doors, when he had the players making sure they all came through the front door, all spoke to all said hello to the staff, made sure they were saying please and thank you at dinner, and they all sat together and stuff like that. And I think that's quite important, to have someone that can. Obviously, that seemed to fall apart at some point, and I think the culture of the club seemed to fall apart, didn't it, after he left? But you want someone that's going to be able to instill that sort of stuff in there. It's like a little bit of discipline, but still be mates with the players almost in that respect. So it's finding that balance. You need to be able to be respected to build that culture. I think it's important that whoever we bring in.
Eustace was given the tag by a few people of PE teacher, and I suppose it's like your PE teacher was your mate, but he was still your teacher.
Yeah.
And if you dicked around too much, he'd put you in line. But if you behaved yourself,
it was always always a lesson you looked forward to the most, or at least it was for me. But yeah, it's spot on. I think it's important that whoever comes in is someone that can actually set that tone early on. This is the way it is. You know, if people are late for training, you fine them or whatever. If they are slacking, you make them do laps or whatever, and then you make sure that they're acknowledging everybody in the building and not too big for all the other staff that work within the club. And obviously you want to set that winning mentality. We've had so many years of just losing that. I know that the squad turnover's been quite high last summer, and it's going to be even higher this summer. So a lot of those people that were used to that say losing habit over the past few years, they're pretty much all gone. Or Duke's going to be still here. Maybe he'll still be here. I kind of see him a little bit differently. Some of the others, maybe, I don't know, but
he's sticking around to score the 100 goals.
100 goals, all off the bench in the last couple of minutes. So that's as important as styles and possession. And I think you set the right tone on that side. Then ultimately, say if you start winning games, as Ben says, that people kind of stop concern themselves with. I mean, you want to be entertained, but at the end of the day, you go to a football match, you want to see your team win. If they win, you're happy. So, and if we're winning more games than we're not, then we're going to get promoted. But Challinor seems like a guy that it can sort of build a culture, set the tone at a club based on the little snippets I'd read about him. Don't know if that's probably not on your radar. Is it on your statistics radar, Ben? Right.
I mean, that type of thing is
culture
much more
set
difficult
55%.
I mean, that type of thing is much more difficult to quantify.
Of course.
Anyway, isn't it? And a lot of that, I guess, is done through conversations with people that have worked with these guys before,
and interviews and stuff,
and things like that. So, I mean, Challinor's in that bracket of. Probably has potentially a little bit more longevity than the previous two names, than Heckingbottom and Alex Neil, but there's probably a few more risks attached to it and a few more unknowns. And what I would say on that is, I think if somebody like Challinor came in and didn't live up to expectations, I don't necessarily think it would damage his reputation or somebody likes that reputation necessarily. I think they would still find themselves a fairly decent job after us anyway.
I mean, just look at Wayne Rooney.
I'll try not to.
That's Dave Challinor. So I mean, sticking with the lower leagues for a minute. Ian Evatt is someone that intrigues me on a few different levels. Now, I think there's a little bit of baggage with him that I'm not sure how much you can and can't say, but I think if people Google, they'll find what they can about him. Maybe, I don't know, but there's a little bit of baggage with him.
Might not want to.
Ian Evatt, I think he's had
don't say anything.
Issues, challenges. He's faced some personal challenges in his life, we'll say. Now so he was Chester, wasn't he? And then Barrow.
Chesterfield,
sorry, yeah, Chesterfield, Barrow, then Bolton. Now he does seem like a possession-based manager. I read a really good article, the coach's voice around him the other day. Oh yes, no, it wasn't the other day. This is how little sleep I've had. It was this morning that I read it. Now he seems like a guy that is very committed to a philosophy, wants as much of the ball as possible, wants to play quickly, and wants to create as many chances as possible. Good article, by the way. We'll link that in there as well. I think it's like the coach's voice or something it's called, with an interview with him. Just about his journey into management. He didn't really want to be a manager, and then he sort of got into it and thought, yeah, this is it, this is for me, and he said, this is how I'm going to play football. But in terms of just as a likeable person, not having it. He's arrogant. He's got one of those faces you'd never tire a punch in. He seems to get very defensive if people start questioning him and his substitutions or philosophy, stuff like that. It's one of those like
Steve Cottrell-esque.
Not far off, actually.
Yeah, close.
Really?
Does he wear a gold chain?
It's not. Yes, he might do, actually. But from a footballing point of view, now, I mean, the playoff final I thought they were quite poor, actually, Bolton, but liked what I've seen of them, the few games I've seen of them, and he seems to be someone that can implement a style and probably a culture as well, despite the fact I just don't seem to like him. He's just one of those personalities. What can you say about him? What do you know about him, Ben? Or
yeah, so I guess he's then probably pushing into that next bracket alongside Williamson and Rossini of being probably very possession dominant. I think over the last couple of seasons, Bolton have averaged 57-ish% possession. And again, on the Opta Analyst kind of team style graph, they're getting towards the kind of bottom right, much closer towards the bottom right of that graph in terms of the slow and the intricate. I mean, he's certainly proven that he can implement a style, and I think going back, there's very little kind of data available from his time at Barrow in the National League, but they were nicknamed Barcelona.
Barcelona, yes, they were indeed, yeah.
Although, having said that, remind me what John Eustace's Kidderminster Harriers were called as well.
Yeah, they were called
the Barcelona of
the non-league, weren't they? Yeah, but they did play. They did play that type of football as well. So I guess it is maybe about the players potentially for which he did point out. So.
But yes,
look forward to watching Blackburn play like Barcelona next season. Then when he's had a full transfer window with them. Let's move on.
Anyway, so Ian Evatt, sticks Ian.
Yeah, so I certainly think he can implement a style that I think has been relatively successful with Bolton. Is he able to take that next step? Where's his ceiling, I guess, as well? So he has got a promotion on his CV. I'm right in saying he promoted from League 2, weren't they, back up to League 1 in his second season, I think.
Yeah, he got promoted with Barrow, hadn't he? He'd done very well with them into the league, and then I think he just felt Bolton was just too good to turn down, which is probably, from a sort of financial standpoint and level of the club, etc. It kind of makes sense. He could probably take Bolton much further than he could take someone like Barrow. I'm guessing, but so I kind of appreciate that.
Depends if it had a wheel on it.
Right. Well done.
Very good. There's also an argument as well that if the club were to appoint somebody or appoint Ian Evatt or Dave Challinor, you're potentially weakening a playoff rival or a team that are likely to be challenging towards the top end of the table. Does that make Bolton or Stockport potentially weaker by taking their manager? The counter side to that argument is that
it's a depressing thought, isn't it? Just let's take them because that'll give us more chance of finishing higher.
We're going to have a coaching team next season of Phil Parkinson, Ian
Evatt. I'm not suggesting that's what we need to do to get promoted, but it possibly enhances the chances. The flip side to that argument is that obviously we have to pay compensation fees for them. Do they use that money to strengthen the team or to go out and find somebody else? Who knows? But it's certainly an interesting option, and one that that hasn't really been spoken about too much, and I wonder whether that's a personality thing. He's rubbed, I think, most fan bases in League One up the wrong way.
He's rubbed.
I like him.
He's rubbed some of his own fans up the wrong way as well. I think they find his just a little bit. He's very
too much
defensive in terms of just the way he responds to questions sometimes. And he's not actually a defensive kind of manager, because you say he's attacking. I think it was either that coach's voice, or it might have been on Wikipedia, that mentioned that he has a habit of, even when they're winning, he'll make an attacking substitution as opposed to a defensive substitution to tighten it at the back. He'll actually just go all out attack just to score more, just to try to score more goals. But it hasn't always worked in his favour. But
I read on Wikipedia as well, and I haven't had the time to check this, but apparently he doesn't often name a substitute goalkeeper, instead opting to name another attacking outfield player instead of that. I have no idea how true that is, but that's Wikipedia.
I'm sold. I'm sold.
So I like he's another one I like the idea of. I just don't think I'll be able to watch any press conferences or post-match interviews with him. I think I might struggle. Although I will do, because if it happens, then it helps towards content, doesn't it? But
the thing for me, I think part of next season is that we need to get an element of a good relationship between everyone back on board as well. If you've got someone that's arguing with their fans, it's probably not a good route to go down, or not arguing with the fans, but he's very defensive over things, and the fans don't take to them. I'm not sure that's the
You
route
kind
that
of want a manager
might
that
be taken.
we will all love, even if he rubs people up the other way and everyone else hates, because that's, you tend to find that when that happens,
Steve Evans.
we'll
That-
let
that-
Rotherham
I'm not
have
saying
him.
I'm not saying go and get him. I mean that sort of manager.
I was thinking
spoke
more,
about it the
yeah,
other week.
potentially that, or maybe.
Everyone hates him, but then if he's your manager, you love it.
I mean, I can't stand Jurgen Klopp, but the Liverpool fans that I play football with, like they're in tears that he's left. Like acts like just down and out. They're still trying to get over him leaving before they can enjoy their onslaughts or whatever it is. It's taken over there. Yeah, he's another one that all their fans love, but I think most opposition fans just don't like him. Maybe it's just me, but that's the vibe I get. Just, I'm glad he's left the Premier League because he does my head in. But anything else on Ian Evatt that you can think of yourself, Ben, or anything from you, Chris?
I don't know anything about him or Bolton. Didn't watch the playoffs or anything, so I'm sitting out of this.
Fair. Okay, shall we move on then?
Yeah.
Time to talk about Gary Rowett. No, we'll briefly talk about Rosinia. You've already mentioned him a bit. I think he's out of the running. I think he's probably got bigger fish to fry. And to be honest, I was out on him a couple of weeks ago anyway. But what do you want to tell us? A brief cameo on?
Tell us a story about Liam Rosinia.
Yeah. Talk to us.
Not from Ballymore. I thought that's where you were going with that. No. Yeah. So
Not Ballymore. He started his managerial career at Ballymore.
What's the story? Go.
So yeah, you've got Rosinia largely credited with the I guess the influence of style and coaching that happened at Derby County under Wayne Rooney. Got the job at Hull midway through the previous season. Just missed out on playoffs, obviously, in the season just gone. Having had quite a decent amount of investment, although I'd say somewhat imbalanced. I think the squad still didn't quite look right, but I think that, well, certainly the owner has come out and said that a difference in style of play and what he perceived to be an underperformance of not making the playoffs has meant that he's lost his job there. The kind of misalignment in style of play is interesting because he is certainly in the kind of bottom right, slow, intricate style, very, very possession heavy, playing out from the back. As we spoke about, I think earlier on, probably, and I think you guys spoke about it on the pod last week, probably struggled a little bit. You know, they got the ball to the final third and then just breaking teams down. And
That surprised me. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
when I heard that, but then we witnessed it, I suppose.
yeah, and actually, I'm trying to think which of the Hull games it was, but the general feeling was that they weren't great. Actually, you know, particularly playing out from the back, they looked very, very nervous, and you know, often looked like we'd have an opportunity scoring.
Our home game against them, they beat us 2-0 when we were pretty dreadful, but there was moments where they were knocking it around the back where they looked, if all it would have taken would have just nicked that ball, turned over the ball quite high up, and we would have been that might have been a completely different story at that point. But yeah, I recall that. But yeah, I didn't think they were good in any of the games if we played against them, and I feel like we played them about 100 times this season.
It was four.
It was four, yeah,
with
different manager for each one.
Different manager for each one, yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I think it seems unlikely because I think he's probably waiting to see what's happening with the managerial merry-go-round that's happening higher up to see what's left over. You know, there's various vacancies and potential vacancies over the next couple of weeks that I'm sure he'll be throwing his hat into the ring for and looking at. But he would certainly be, I think, what would be defined as a coup for a League One club. That said, I was probably not as hot as quite a lot of people were who were saying absolutely number one choice, but mainly for the fact that you can only go on the evidence that has kind of, that's happened, that we've seen. And again, in a league next year where we will have to break teams down, I would really, really struggle to see, unless you go down the Leicester route of basically you have a team of quality players that is so far above the league that actually you could just completely dominate. I think we'd really struggle. And I don't.
And he had some good players at Hull as well. He had some really, really good attacking players as well. It's quite surprising at how poor they were in the final third, or how disappointing they were in the final third. Definitely punching below their weight at that point, I think.
There's just a part of me that could see us rocking up to wherever next season, an away game like Stevenage, and having 78% of the ball and managing to muster 3 shots and lose 2-0 to 2 set-piece goals, or a set-piece goal and an error playing out from the back, and we're all there going...
See, I was... when that was first sort of... When he was first sacked, I was like, we've got to go in there. If Tony Mowbray doesn't come back,
I was the same initially.
And do you know what I think it was? I'd completely forgotten about when we'd played them.
All 4 times.
Like that all went all 4 games. That all sort of went out the window, and my mind went back to the Ipswich game that they had right at the end of the end of the season, and it was thrilling. And I think we mentioned it on the podcast, like how like the intensity of it was, and that's like the type of football that you want to go and see, the urgency, the desire to win, and the Blues didn't have anywhere near that. And I think that game sort of really stuck in my mind. So then as we've heard opinions from people and then these different stats, it's like, yeah, do you know what? Going into League One next season and having this manager in place, we probably do want someone who's going to actually go, right, we know how to break teams down. We know what we need to do in the final third. Not someone who's going to struggle if they've got 5 sitting back and then a midfield on top of them and they're just packing it out. So, yeah, I think we're probably... I was all for it, but I think I'm probably now on the side of, there are better options for us available.
At this point, because I think that's... I'm not sitting here, and I'm sure nobody else is sitting here and saying that Liam Rosina is a bad manager. Far from it.
True.
He will likely get a top Championship job or lower Premier League job. But again, I think you appoint a manager for the situation that you're in, and like I say, I genuinely think he would probably struggle in League One, possibly.
It's probably a gamble in the opposite direction. We're talking about gambles from League Two coming up to manage us in League One. It's probably a gamble the other way around, in that he's got a sort of comfortable Hull side there, where they're not the big fish. They go into games where they're not going to have to break teams down too often until probably the latter end of the season. Whereas next season it will be that, like you mentioned earlier with Challinor, that you are the team that has to come out front footed and has to take the game to people.
And our fans aren't wired to be patient enough to sit and watch us knock it around the back for 5 minutes before we sort of transition through the thirds or whatever. I think we've just been so used to the way football has been for such a long time, that the core values of the club are still kind of like just Garrett, or it's like the Garrett Forward Brigade, or there's a little bit of education that probably needs to go on there, and you can just see the crowds getting frustrated if we're just having possession just for feels.
Do you know what doesn't help though? Every time that we've had this education forced upon us in footballing terms, we've not had the players to do it. We've had Zola came in, and you could see the plan. You could see what they were trying to do. Didn't have the players for it. Karanka came in, tried to do something,
That's less so with Karanka, wasn't it? It's less so.
Less so. Tried to do something. Mowbray's come in, so we'll skip past before Mowbray.
Just like Plymouth.
Mowbray came in, and it was the first time that you could see, and with an addition of some players as well, that you could see, we might actually go somewhere with this now. And then he went away. As we mentioned, the man management that we've lost with Mowbray, and it was that sort of that patience that people had started building up with watching the football that evaporated.
Yeah.
And we were at games where people didn't have the patience for it, and it was like, fuck's sake, and it all went out, again. So
I've always said it's something that needed to be time was needed. It needed to evolve slowly over time. You just can't just try and implement this thing straight away. But and obviously now we have to bring in hopefully be able to bring in more technically capable players in the Premier League, in League One. Fuck, that's a few years away yet, isn't it? Obviously, we want to make sure that they're not all 5'5" and made out of balsa wood as well. So try and what did Mowbray call them?
Balance.
Yeah, add soldiers. Yeah, soldiers and artists. Get the balance right and get someone that's actually here to soldier and an artist. So. Yeah, so people like Rosini, I think our fans will maybe struggle with anyway. Like the idea feels good on paper, but actually when you want to implement it, people just end up getting frustrated. And say in a season when there's going to be a high number of teams are probably looking to shut up shop or trying just to nullify us, it's someone like that probably it's not the way forward for me.
Is there anyone else? Anyone we haven't mentioned that you think?
Well, I mean, the Keep Right On pod mentioned Frank Lampard, which I was just like, get in the bin. It's like,
my issue with Frank Lampard is I still can't work out if he's actually a good manager or not.
Yeah, should have done better with Derby. Did well under tight circumstances. Sorry,
Chelsea.
my dog has just walked in here.
Thrown his hat into.
Did well with Chelsea with like bringing youngsters and stuff through, but obviously, where was it? Everton seemed quite poor to me, but I don't know. I don't even know if he'd be interested. Obviously, he'd want a way back. I think he'd probably like a way back into the game, and we are probably I'll use the term loosely, big enough club for him to try again, but I think he could probably get a bigger club anyway, based on his name, and I don't want to go down that route again either.
No,
Been linked with the Burnley job, hasn't he? Don't know how credible that is.
I don't know, I've seen Scott Parker was interviewing for it, but I had seen a Frank Lampard thing as well, but I don't know who they'll go for. So my cat is now coming. I've got a cat and a dog in here at the moment. Not on camera, thankfully. But
so a couple of names that we've mentioned before as well. We mentioned them last week. Lee Carsley, who I don't think will be anywhere near it for the reasons that we spoke about before. Wouldn't surprise me if there was interest on Blues' part, but I don't think that you can sway him from.
Seems to be a name that crops up every time, isn't it? Without there being it seemingly going any further.
I think it's a bigger risk than anyone has spoken about as well. I like the idea. I get why there's obviously a link to the club, that he does play football in a manner that I think that everyone would find attractive.
Ashley Cole-Link,
yeah, he's on to such a good thing with England, and I think he's probably well in that sort of managerial grooming pipeline of potentially taking the England job at some point, maybe in the future. But Ashley Cole's another one that's been mentioned again, that he hasn't managed anybody. So, I can't see him being given the job, and the people calling for him to be given a chance. It's a bit of a head scratcher as Ben scratches his head himself there.
Perfect time.
For me, that's a no. And he was here. I guess he's still on the books of the club because he was a club appointment, but he was here last season throughout the whole thing and for a lot of it, and look where we are now. No, I'm not putting that all down to him because that's obviously not the reason. But if he had such a winning mentality and he could drive such a culture, then maybe things would have been slightly different potentially. But just my point of view, just my view.
Is there anyone else?
Give it Robbo. Oh, you're after serious suggestions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jeff Hallfield, Michael Johnson,
Michael Forsell.
Yeah,
the dream team.
Do
Gary is taking up management now,
he's
isn't
got a winning record at Blues as manager, hasn't he? So 100% record.
I don't doubt that there will be names of people that are potentially being, and I think I tweeted something similar the other day, there'll be people that are being interviewed or being considered that we'll probably never know about, that we've probably never thought of. I mean, I would suspect potentially that the hiring will be domestic based. But I mean,
so.
There's a big world out there.
I think they have been looking at names from abroad. There was a bit of a whisper around that they were looking at some people in, I want to say Spain and Portugal, but is that right, Chris? I know we had a brief conversation about it, but again, I think that was a statistics-driven thing. I heard some bits around Michael Beale as well. Not for me. You can understand maybe. You can understand maybe the theory behind it. If you look at Sunderland,
is Michael Beale's burner Twitter account still out there? Can we just check that and see whether there's anything? Michael Beale's going to be manager of Birmingham City. Right.
I mean, I'm not suggesting him, but he's a name that that has been mentioned to me. I think there's probably others as well that we haven't thought of, and there's probably a few lower league managers as well. We obviously mentioned Mike Williamson, the guy at Crawley, Scott Lindsay, is it as well? It's maybe another one that potentially. A lot of people have mentioned that Skubala at Lincoln, but he's very much a counter-attack manager.
Don't mention it to Lincoln fans either. They get very defensive if you mention his name. Yeah, there was some talk that he was on the shortlist at Plymouth, and Lincoln fans got very defensive about it.
Wow, interesting.
Did he not pass the character assessment?
No, I was going to say character assassination then. No, that's entirely different.
The personality content.
Yes.
But outside of that, you're looking at, we've mentioned before, like people like Chris Davies or Anthony Barry, and I do like the idea of going for someone like that, but at the same time, it is quite a big risk, isn't it? When we want to get out of this league, I think we obviously want to get out at the first attempt, but I think they are dead set on getting out of the league at the first attempt. So. Well, the screens are up, aren't they? Right, so Biggie Screens. That's where the name came from, by the way. So, so that one after last week's question,
screens are
what's going to happen first, the managers or the screens up? Screens are up, massive, aren't they? Look quite impressive.
Well, we can only hope they're going to use them to announce a manager.
That would be funny.
That's what I'd do.
I would like that.
With no one in there.
I hope it was actually there. Are they working?
I don't think we've seen any signs of life yet, but surely that's the first thing to do.
Yeah.
Show off your new screens with something like that.
The manager revealed to an empty stadium.
They'll be filming it, Chris, don't worry.
Okay.
That's how it works.
Yeah, apparently the other day when they were lifting the screens into place, the media team ran out and said, actually, can you bring it back down again so we can film it going on?
There's been a lot of social media content around the screens.
Enjoyed it, haven't they?
Yeah, so it would be nice if they did something with the manager announcement to do with the screens. It'd be fitting. It'd be nice to I think a lot of people seem to be getting quite twitchy on social media about the fact that nothing's been announced yet, and we're behind and this, that, and the other.
I just wish people would chill the fuck out, because I want them to take this. If we want them to take their time at any point, it's now. With this, take the time, get the appointment right. If that means multiple interviews, So be it if that means first round with Craig Gardner, Mike Rigg, and then second round with Gary Cook, and then Tom Wagner, and then Tom Wagner flying over to do in-person interviews, like to make the final call, whatever. So be it, or fly someone out to the States, whatever, whichever way around they want to do it. It's vitally important they get this right. They have to be confident in who they're taking, and if that means multiple interviews, 3-4 interviews with the same person to make sure, then they'll choose someone. We're not going to go into pre-season without a manager. So everyone just needs to chill out a little bit, because people, as you say, Ben, people are getting twitchy.
And the kind of the comparison to Rotherham is a complete non-comparison, because Rotherham have known which league they're going to be in since February, March time.
Yeah,
they've been planning for League. Well, presumably Rotherham just planned for League One as soon as they get promoted to the Championship, and then vice versa, because that seems to be the way they yo-yo. So yes.
People that seem to be moaning about they've signed 6 players. It's like, I wouldn't sign any of those players. I wouldn't want any of the players that Rotherham have signed. Thanks. I'm not interested in any one of them.
happy to eat my words, and this will come up on some EFL meme page at some point. But I just don't think we're going to be shopping in the same markets as Rotherham.
No.
Largely, we will. We're not going to sign 15 players from the Championship or whatever, but I largely think that we're going to be shopping in fairly different waters to what they're shopping in.
We've still got a pool there. I think there are some players that potentially could join a Championship team that would still play come to Blues as well. So, yeah, completely agree with you on that one.
I'm sure that those conversations are probably taking place even without a manager as well. I think we sort of mentioned that the other week, that recruitment side of things is probably still ongoing, regardless of the fact that we haven't got a manager in place, because by the time that you've got the manager in place, you can then run the rule over the options that you've got, or if there's a signing that you really think fits in with the mentality or philosophy, you've got a player.
I'd be surprised if there's not one or two that are quite a way down the line already. That are probably just waiting to see what happens. And I've seen that on social media a little bit as well, as how can we be linked with players if we haven't got a manager? Well, the whole point of having a director of football and a head of recruitment and recruiting for a particular
head
style is so that
have we got a head of recruitment on it?
Is he in the garden?
Yeah, you might be.
But the whole point of having that structure is so that you don't have to wait for a manager to be in place and sign 15 players, and then they leave 14 months later, and you then have to sign another 15 players to fit a completely different style. So there will, as you said, there'll be conversations ongoing. There'll be probably a few that are way down the line. They might not come off, but there'll be a few that are down the line. I'm sure of that.
So then, before we do finish up, I think we've probably touched on most of the managers that are going to be mentioned,
and
then it'll be
it's going to be something completely different that we've not mentioned.
Yeah. Predictions, managers. Who do you reckon? One name each.
This is going to do my fanboy tag no good, but I could see it being Alex Neil.
Chewy?
Can you go to Dave? Because I don't.
Go on, vegan.
I'm also saying the same as Ben. Alex Neil. Chris?
Chewy?
Yeah,
me?
You go. Yeah, there you go.
Do you want
Give
me
me
to go
even more
first?
time just to.
I'm going to go Challinor. I just think that it's a gamble, but it's a gamble for the project, and it is something that we can all sort of develop, and it's a more long-term plan. Dewey?
They've obviously been quite thorough here. There's a number of interviews been taking place per day throughout the last week or so. I don't know how close they are to making a final decision. They might not have even interviewed the person they're going to they're going to take it. There's a lot of noise around Alex Neil, but I think if it is going to be him, I feel like it might already have been announced now. And also, when Football Insider released that story, there's only one person that I have any interest in paying attention to when it comes to managers in the EFL, and it's normally John Percy. And now he was a person that ran the Neil interview first. I think we would have heard something from him by this point. I'm gonna go with Heckingbottom just for someone different. So, I like the idea of Challinor, I really, really do, but I don't know if they'll take the risk on him, even though there has apparently been some interest from the club. I don't know who at the club, considering the regime had changed. I guess Gardner's the same person, but I'm going to say Heckingbottom just because I want to be different to you guys and I'll do something different to you, Chris. So that's what we'll go with. So it's not really a prediction. It's
2 Alex Neils, Challinor,
and a Heckingbottom in a pear tree.
Well, let's hope they put all of those faces up on the new screens and one by one, kind of like turn them off, revealing.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
everyone who's been discussed, this, in the last hour, 45 minutes. If we could get all their faces up there.
Squid Game stuff.
There's just something. I just have this gut feeling it could be someone that hasn't even been mentioned. It could just be a completely like left field thing, but not too left field that it's a disaster. I don't know why. There's just.
We will look forward to welcoming back Steve Bruce then.
Mark Hughes. It's Mark Hughes. If you look at Mike Rigg, and Mark Hughes took Mike Rigg to Man City. Yes, it was Mark Hughes that took Mike Rigg to Man City, not Gary Cook, which I think is a common...
It was Mark Hughes that took Mike Rigg to Man City?
Yeah, it's a common misconception that Gary Cook took him there. He didn't. They worked together there. And they also...
Did they not work together with Wales, FA?
Wales, Blackburn, and somebody else. Wales, Blackburn, Man City. There's one other. Might have been Stoke, not sure. But there was, they've had a few. They worked together in a few places.
There you go. Well, we'll be back when something's announced or when there's some news to talk about. But in the meantime, Ben, thank you very much for coming and chatting to us. And
pleasure as always.
No, it was fantastic. I love getting your insight on it. Whenever things come up like this, it's brilliant. It's perfect. So thank you for joining us. Until next time.
UPR was the other team that Mike Rigg worked with Mark Hughes, albeit very briefly.
And until next time, keep right on.
Keep right on.